So here we are. I prepared some questions, but we'll see how the conversation is going to go. We are here at the Mediterranean Theological Meetings that bring together students of theology, Catholic, Orthodox, and Protestants. I'm interested at the beginning of this interview. How do you define theology and what is its role in the modern world?
For me, theology is when the gospel meets the world in mutual illumination. So, as a Christian, I understand the world through the vision of the gospel, but it's also the other way around. The world helps me to understand the gospel. So it's a conversation, and it has to go both ways.
Yeah, it's interesting image. And do you think that it's much easier to understand in that way theology today, or maybe in the past times?
Oh, I never lived in Yes, I think certainly if I go back to the Dominican origins, you see this fascinating dialogue with Aristotle, but also for Aquinas with Judaism and Islam. At the beginning of the Summa Theologica, you have references to pagan, Islamic, and Jewish thinkers. I think today it's more difficult because not many people want to dialogue with it.
Okay.
But that is why we have to be humble and show that we are prepared to listen to them. Then maybe they will be prepared to listen to us.
To show the first sign of openness. And on that idea of difficulties of dialogue today, what do you think about these kind of programs as Mediterranean Theological Meetings, where for the 4th year we gather young people from different Christian denominations to think about and listen to theology for a week from different world-famous theologians such as Thomas Halik, Pantelis, Kalaizidis, Tina Biti, Luke, Vereteron, and many others. We were often exposed to attacks, discredits, and attempts to shut down this project because some thinks that we were poisoning students with some kind of progressive ideas. Have you encountered such accusations before, and what do you think about them?
Yes, I'm afraid often. Particularly when I have been lecturing in the United States. I have many groups of people have written to bishops to say he must not be allowed to enter this diocese. I've even had to have police protection in Ireland once. But what has changed things was Pope Francis. Pope Francis named me a consultant to the Vatican. Since that time, the attacks have diminished enormously. In my experience, what you have to do is patiently engage. Once I had an email early in the morning from a Polish businessman, and he said, "You are terrible, you should leave the church," and so on. Mamma mia. I asked him why, and he attributed to me statements I'd never made. And he'd put together things to make new statements I did not agree with. It took a whole day, exchange all the time, and by the evening he said, "Thank you, I was wrong." So you need enormous patience. And you have to ask, what are they afraid of? Many people are afraid. And we believe, when the gospel says, perfect love casts out fear. When there is perfect love, we are not afraid of anything. So, if we are assured, confident in the perfect love that God has for us, with all our limitations, with all our inadequacy, we do not need to be afraid. The Franciscan Minister General, Anthony Perry, said, "No baptized has the right to fear." I would change it. I would say we are all afraid. No baptized has the right to be the slave of fear. We're all afraid, but we shouldn't let it dominate our lives.
Yeah, When we speak about Catholic Church, we always think about, it seems to me, that great tension between, I could say from the one side, who thinks always that in the Church we possess the truth, and on the other side, the other part which thinks that in the Church we are actually always looking in the search, continuous search for the truth. And this is especially related to the understanding of doctrine and its unchangeability, especially when they are opposing, for example, questions like ordination of women or married priests. How do you view the doctrine, and how do you understand its unchangeability?
That's a wonderful question. I think there is a dogmatic rejection of dogma. G.K. Chesterton, who I love, he said all human beings are dogmatic. The difference is between those who know and those who don't know. He said turnips are completely undogmatic. They're very open-minded. I think for us the question is, healthy, good, liberating dogma never says stop. It always opens the space. Heresy, and there is heresy is small-minded. Heresy is too tiny. It tries to force you into a simple answer. The easy example is the divinity and humanity of Christ. Chalcedon. You had a small group who said, no, he's really human. There's another group in Alexandria saying, no, he's really divine. Two simple answers. Orthodoxy opens a big space. It liberates you from small thoughts. So I love dogma, because dogma makes you think. Dogma never stops you thinking. It is always at the beginning of the process. As for questions like the ordination of women, we shall see. I think we journey. I have sympathy with Pope Francis when he said, I don't want to clericalize women, I want to de-clericalize the Church. But let's see. Cardinal Hume, Archbishop of Westminster, who is a great hero of mine, he said, if the Church says women can be ordained, fine. Let's just go forward. I think often the question is, what is the first question? And if we make the first question, can women be ordained? I don't think that's a good idea. The first question is, how do we live together? How do we have authority? Everybody has authority. What authority? How is it lived? And then I think we can go forward and we shall see. But I don't think there is any doctrinal ruling out of the ordination of women. Personally, I would be very excited with the ordination of women deacons, because we need the voice of women. We need to hear them in the Church. So, andiamo avanti.
Also, one sort of hearing woman's voice inside the Church also is that question about celibacy in the Church and viri probati, what was talked about in Amazonia. That could be also one sort of opening to have the Church, clerical part of the Church, much closer to the woman. You have the priests who have like real experience from life and the struggles and problems and ideas and imagination which women have. Yeah.
And in England, we have maybe 200 married Catholic priests who, before they were Anglican. And with Pope Benedict's permission, they have been ordained priests and they are married. So we are getting used to it. I think the other thing is our culture underestimates theology. I was a co-founder of the Catholic Association, the Theological Association of Great Britain. When it was founded 40 years ago, all the members were either Dominicans or Jesuits. Now, half of the members are lay people, and most of those are women. So when we are thinking, our theological resources are increasingly coming from men and women talking to each other. And I think that is immensely important.
When you mentioned that in UK you have that experience of hundreds of married priests already, what's your impression? Does the local community and church find problem with that? Is there some struggles they need to overcome?
Not that I know of. It may be the case, but I've never heard it. In my experience, they are welcome, and they give an enormous amount. They give a great deal from their experience as married people, raising children, all the difficulties. So there's been no rejection that I know of in England.
How do you specifically see the possibilities and path towards dialogue with populists and fundamentalists, given that yourself said that is an increasingly common form of simplified thinking, especially on social media, Twitter today?
It is very difficult. What I fear most in our culture is populism. You see in England the rise of politicians who talk of the will of the people. That is language that preceded the French Revolution, Russian Revolution, Franco, Mussolini. Always you start with the will of the people that we know. So, and also with fundamentalism. I think, as I said this morning, the threat of economic fundamentalism, the market is everything, or scientific fundamentalism, religious fundamentalism. So I think a proper dialogue is very difficult. You have to be there, you have to listen, and you have to maybe invite people delicately, and not just try to destroy them. I think with fundamentalism, everybody will have a moment when they know it's not enough. And you see it certainly in forms of Christian fundamentalism, but also scientific fundamentalism. I was a chaplain at Imperial College of Science and Technology in London. Top British scientists. They're human beings. They fall in love. They suffer. And when they do that, they know that the fundamentalism is not enough. Populism, I don't know. We have to hope that there will be an opening to other people, which is a very dangerous force.
You spoke about the importance of open-mindedness and imagination in our thought process. Especially you've made some reflection on art. And now one question about these topics, because it's actual today in Croatia also. There's a great debate now about Marko Ivan Rupnik and his art. Because of accusations for abuse, they're thinking about removing his art from churches. What do you think about these ideas? And on the other side, what do you think about his art, which is omnipresent in church today?
Yes, not in England. I'd never heard of him until the thing broke in the press. In England, it has been Eric Dill. Eric Dill was a famous sculptor. He made sculptures for the BBC, Westminster Cathedral, everywhere. Renowned. And now we've discovered that he had abusive relationships within his own family. And there is a big demand for his sculptures to be removed. And I have to say, I'm sorry, I don't know. I really don't know. You can see that great art can be produced. It is often produced by morally failures. Think of Caravaggio, who's one of my favorite painters in the world. He notoriously had a very loose life. In fact, he was accused of murder. Yet we love his painting. My instinct, therefore, is not to remove. But maybe it depends a bit on the sort of offence. Because Caravaggio succumbed to the passions of life. What you see, I think, in some abuse is an abuse of power, which maybe is a different sort of thing. maybe with the abuse of power, the destruction of children, maybe other issues are raised. So I would, maybe they will have to go. I don't know. I'm searching.
Yeah, searching. Following your thoughts in your books, what do you think is Christianity today in Europe? Is it at its end? Could we say it's dead in Europe? What is its future? Where its strength today? Should the Church try to find some new sorts or means of evangelizations, and where they are?
I am hopeful. In the one of the prefaces to saints, we say of God that He raises up new saints every day. There are people in our congregations, young people. Maybe they're only children now, but we are always given people who will be created. Are we aware of them? Are we listening to them? And I think one of the key tasks is for a bishop, for a priest, is keep an eye open, an ear open for young people who are being created, support them. Because the old will die, and the young will come, and God will give it if we are attentive, if we are awake. So often the role of people in government is what we used to call the ars moriendi, the art of dying. Not because we come to the end, but because there will be a new beginning. I see signs of it now with my young brothers that I know in England, young Dominicans. They are bright and kind, and they understand technology. They have helped us enormously in lockdown to do new things, to create new posts, and they've done wonderful things. And they are moving beyond that boring old opposition of left and right, progressive conservative. In the end, it's not very useful. And I can see it with some of our young brethren. They've moved beyond that. And we have to let them lead it. Every young person has his adventure. It's different from my adventure. I grew up in a very Catholic family. We went to confession every week. We were very devout. My adventure was to go out into the world, take off my habit. Dominican worker priests going to factory. The young have an adventure too. It's a different one. Because most of them were raised in atheist or agnostic background, at least in Britain. Their adventure is the opposite to mine. Still an adventure. And I must understand their adventure. I mustn't see it as the contradiction part. Intention, great. Intentions are wonderful. But not the contradiction.
So you're hopeful
I am.
about future Christianity in Europe?
Oh, absolutely. And I think we must not be afraid.
When we speak about these new movements, let's say like, for example, new church movements and new communities, mostly today they are having like a lot of vocations. Do you think that these new movements are some sort of restoring the power of the church, or is some sort of escape from the life? And often it brings some dangers, as it was the case with some famous Dominican, Maria Dominic Philip, for example.
Yeah.
Because we are witnessing even in Croatia that if somebody could see in these moments like new power and strength of Christianity. What do you think about these?
I think the role of the founder is always so difficult. Because the temptation is to make the founder everything, the authority. It happened with Marie Dominique Philippe. It happened a little bit with Jean Vanier. It happened with St. Francis. It happened with Mother Teresa of Calcutta. Always the death of the founder is difficult. And so how do we move on to the second generation? And that requires a lot of patient listening. You cannot ever have one authority, always. Authority must be multiple, which is why I believe in Dominican democracy. these movements have never worked in England. None of them. Not the Petit Frères, the Beatitude, the Lions of Judah. None of them. Una Liberazione. None of them happened in England. We have a very parish-based church. Maybe too much. So I think we should be open to new movements. But they must negotiate patiently, slowly, their way forward. You know, when the Franciscans were founded, there were multiple new movements of 4 people, 4 men, preachers, very like St. Francis. Most of them were a disaster and drifted into heresy. But not all. St. Francis was a great gift. So we see all these movements, and many of them will fail. That's fine. It usually happens. But maybe 1 or 2, 3 or 4 will be transformed.
So it's our approach to them while they are developing should be some sort of supportive guidance.
Yeah, fraternal. We are their brothers and sisters.
Pope Francis opened the church quite a bit and made important cuts. In your opinion, will the next Pope continue on that path, or will he try to hit the brakes due to great resistance?
I am pretty confident he will not hit the brakes. I may be so wrong, I may be surprised. I think the church is changed forever. And even if we go backwards a little bit, we're not going to go backwards entirely. Francis has picked up the Vatican Council, the message of the Vatican Council, and it has moved forward. And I don't think it can ever go back. We're on the way to becoming a pilgrim people. And I sympathize with the people who are afraid, who don't know where it's going to go, who fear the loss of the church they love. But the church always goes forward. The question is not do we move, the question is whether we move together. And that's the point of the synodal movement.
When you're speaking about, you mentioned synod and you're part of the synod, and what you can share with us as maybe for you the nicest or most interesting idea you heard in the synod?
Gosh, when I read the Instrumentum Laboris twice, and I think a theme that surfaces for me strongly is home. How can we be at home with each other? We all need a home. I'm going to, in my retreat, take the theme of the Transfiguration. We're on the mountain. The voice says, listen to him. You have to come down the mountain and walk. And this is the first synod ever in the history of Christianity, walking to Jerusalem. The first thing they do is to fail. They can't cast out the demon. But slowly, slowly they get there. And what I hope is that we will learn to be at home with each other. They were at home on the mountain. Peter says, let's stay here. Let's not change anything. We must understand that. And they will be at home on the other side of Jerusalem after the resurrection. We have different ideas of home. And we need to have sympathy with each other.
And like for the closing question, while you were general of the Dominican Order, you saw you have some picture of whole world and church in the whole world. You're familiar with the ecclesiastic and social context of the church in Europe and with the differences between Western and Eastern Europe. What would you say to Catholics in Eastern and Central Europe? What should they learn from the experience of the church that has been living in secular context for a long time in the West?
You know, the big problem after the fall of the Soviet Union was trust. We saw this in Hungary, the Czech Republic, all over the place. Because communism taught people not to trust it. And the big job in my time was not educating, but encouraging the brethren, trust each other. You love each other, you can trust each other. And that was the problem. Now I have not been the master of the order for 22 years, so maybe the challenges are different. But that was my experience.
So I think for Eastern Europe it's important to have bigger trust probably to the world, to the society.
Yeah, absolutely. People are fundamentally good. And even when they say stupid things, they're usually trying to say something good. And when they make mistakes and they fail, as we all do, somewhere deep down, God is there working in their lives. Thomas Aquinas, we have not mentioned the guy. Thomas Aquinas said, in a way, we have to trust our desires. Our desires are always somewhere desires for the fullness of God. So we have to educate our desires. We make mistakes, but deeply we are passionate people. And what we long for is God. All of us.
And last question, personal, if I can, as the one world famous theologian and preacher and friar, how do you pray?
The first part of prayer every day is just silence. I go into the chapel, and usually there are 3 or 4 brothers. We don't speak. You're there before God in silence. Sister Wendy Beckett said, prayer is being unprotected in the presence of God. And I think for me that's the foundation. If God is our friend, what do you want to do with a friend? You want to be with them. So we begin just by being with God. Not saying anything, not thinking anything, just being there. You remember Jean Vianney talked about the peasant in the church. He looks at me, I look at him. For me, that's the foundation of prayer. And then the brethren arrive, and we sing the psalms, and we praise, and we have the Eucharist. But the rooting of it all is the love of silence. I sometimes talk too much, but silence is what I love.
Okay, Brother Timothy, thank you very much for your time and for patience with answering on this question.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.